Out of the dust. It was March of 1934. I heard the wind rise and stumbled from my bed, down the stairs, out of the front door, into the yard. The night sky kept flashing. Lightning danced down its spindly legs. I sensed it before I knew it was coming. I heard it, smelled it, tasted it. Dust. At the start of the 1900s, offers of cheap public land attracted farmers to the region, and in World War I, in the midst of a relatively wet period, a lucrative new wheat market opened up. Advances in gasoline-powered farm machinery made production faster and easier than ever. During the 1920s, millions of acres of grasslands across the plains were converted into wheat fields at an unprecedented rate. In 1930, with the Great Depression underway, wheat prices collapsed. Rather than follow the government's urging to cut back on production, desperate farmers harvested even more wheat in an effort to make up for their losses. Fields were exposed and vulnerable to a drought which hit in 1932. Once the winds began to pick up dust from the fields, they grew into dust storms of biblical proportions. Each year, the storms grew more ferocious and more frequent, sweeping millions of tons of dirt, covering farms and homes across the plains with sand and spreading the dust across the country. Children developed often fatal dust pneumonia. Business owners, unable to cope with financial ruin, committed suicide, and thousands of desperate Americans were torn from their homes and forced on the road in an exodus unlike anything the United States has ever seen. There was a huge devastation that happened in the 1930s. This became known as the Dust Bowl, which occurred in a section of the Great Plains. This includes states such as southeastern Colorado, southwestern Kansas, the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma, and northeastern New Mexico. The Dust Bowl was caused because of wind erosion that occurred because of the drought. It was the worst man-made ecological disaster in American history. Part of the reason for the Dust Bowl was because of over-farming, livestock overgrazing, drought, and poor farming practices. This Dust Bowl destroyed millions of acres, and as a result, tens of thousands of families were forced to abandon their farms. The novel Out of the Dust takes place in the 1930s, around the time of the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. This is the story of 14-year-old Billie Jo Kelby, who tells the hardships of living on her family's wheat farm in the Oklahoma Panhandle during the Dust Bowl years of the Depression. Billie Jo and her parents are barely making a living as the winds and dust continually destroys their wheat crop. Billie Jo describes herself as a long-legged girl with a wide mouth and cheekbones like bicycle handles. He, her father, got a red-headed, heckle-faced, narrow-hipped girl with a fondness for apples and a hunger for playing fierce piano. The story is told from her point of view and is written in diary entries or free verse. The author writes the book in poetry form because of her love of poetry, and it helps convey the concept of what it was like living day by day with parents who are struggling through the days of the Depression. Billie Jo puts the month and year and explains what has happened during that day, whether it is her helping her father out in the yard or helping her mother bake a cake. Billie Jo does a wonderful job of explaining and going into great detail of everyday events and what it is like to experience a Dust Bowl. Being from a farming family in Oklahoma during the devastating drought of the 30s is certainly not a bountiful life. However, young Billie Jo is thankful for the things she does have, like her family, her music, and the sweet apples that grow on her mother's apple tree. That is, until tragedy occurred that strips Billie Jo of the things she loves, leaving her to question her life on the dusty plains. Are the roots of her heritage strong enough to keep Billie Jo in ceremony, or will the wind carry her away with the dust? Here's a quote from young Billy Joe. "The way I see it, hard times aren't only about money or drought or dust. Hard times are about losing spirit and hope and what happens when dreams dry up. And I know now that all the time I was trying to get out of the dust, the fact is, what I am because of the dust. What I am is good enough, even for me."